Om Nama Sreshtam Manumapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urpuri Masuri Oshtabhati Radha Kundam Girivaram O Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Prasita Kripaya Sri Guru Tammato Smi Nindantam Pulakotkarena Vikasatani Paprasuna Chavim Rodhi Kritya Bujadvayam Hari Hari Tuchairvadantam Ho Nityantam Galadasrunir Jarachayaik Sinchantamurvitalam Gayantam Nijaparshadaih Parivritam Tam Gaurachandram Stumaha Adipih Paripalita Pravalita Sanandama Dokita Pratyasham Sumanah Falodaya Vidho Samodama Modita Brindaranya Bhuvi Prakasha Madhura Sarvati Sai Sriya Radha Madhavayo Pramodayatu Ma Ulasa Kalpa Druma Sri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Gosai Kuri Charana Bandhan Jaha Hoite Vighnanath Abhishta Puram Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Sri Radhe. So we finally come to the concluding portion of Anuched 7. So when I finished it, I'm going to have to go back and look at all those previous ones again. I've already read through this Anuched 10 times. But to rename each portion in a way that more fits the overall picture of the Anuched. At any rate, so here we see what Jiva Goswami really, how he's concluding this whole section. Only pure souls can have a direct vision of Bhagavan, and that is called mukti. So this is really where we started. And we went off into a lot of tangents. And now he's coming back to the starting point. And what is that? Tasmat Shwacha Chittanam Eva Sakshatkara. That direct vision is only possible for those who have pure minds. Sa eva cha mukti sangya iti stitam. And that is called mukti. That takes the name mukti. So now go back to the whole global thing of what we've been looking at in the Priti Sandarbha. We're establishing mukti, the question that the Shastra doesn't talk about a pancham purushartha, it only talks about a fourth purushartha, which is called mukti. So Jiva has to expand the meaning of mukti to include Priti. He has to divide mukti into a sort of, well, the whole logic has been, the problem is vimukata, bahirmukata. That's the problem. And turning towards God, Bhagavat unmukata, that's the solution. Our problem is that we've turned away from God, and the solution is to turn towards Him. As so many religions have said in the past, it seems like this is a consistent idea. So here it's saying that if the heart is pure, then one can see Krishna. And that seeing of Krishna, that direct experience of God, that direct experience of the absolute truth, that is called liberation. Okay. So now, we've been talking about this from a number of different points of view. And believe me, we will be returning to these questions without any doubt. But one of the points that was made earlier on was that swacha chittanam, that it's not enough to just have purity of heart, that one has to have Krishna's mercy. And then there was a whole discussion about really seeing Krishna or not seeing Krishna, or really having sin and not having sin. What is a pure heart? If someone is a pure devotee, if someone sees Krishna, all his sins are supposedly removed, and then how can he still sometimes appear to have sins or appear to somehow or another not have the purity of heart that one would expect from a pure devotee? So that is a problem, and we should understand that by saying that of the two, of the sin and of the devotion is more. If we see the devotion as being greater, if we see the symptoms of purity as outweighing those of some infidelity, that should be given prominence. And in the other hand, if it's the other way around, if we see that the person is overwhelmingly inclined to selfish activity and to exploiting others for his own personal aggrandizement, even if such person has some mystic powers, even if that person has some charisma, even if that person has some knowledge, even if that person professes to have seen God, there is no compatibility. The sun rises, the darkness is removed. If a person shows an overweening attraction to sense pleasure, to sense gratification, and to fame and all the other accoutrements of pratishta, labh, puja, all these things, then one should probably keep one's distance. Even though externally all the signs might be there of glory, wealth, disciples. All the other bells and whistles that go with being a guru. So, the point was that, so that's where Jiva ran into a bit of a problem. I had to discuss several incidences from the Shastras, and to try to get to this idea of an external and an internal vision. At any rate, that took up a lot of the Anuched, but we're getting back to the essence here. So the idea is that even though it sometimes appears to be otherwise, in actual fact, those who have seen Krishna with a pure heart, they have attained the ultimate liberation. That is the sum of everything that we've had up to this point. Not only really in this Anuched, but in all the Anucheds up to this point. So now he's still summarizing, I would say, summarizing not just this Anuched, but all the Anucheds to this point. So tasya Brahma Sakshatkarad api utkarshastu Bhagavata Sandarbhe Sanakadi Vaikuntha Darshana Prastave Sri Narada Vyasa Sangvadadi Maya Brahma Bhagavata Taratamya Prakarane Cha Darshita Eva. Okay, so the word prakarana has come up. The word prakarana means a section. So in the a succession of chapters or anucheds, a group of anucheds or a group of sutras that are covering the same subject. So in this particular case, there's a prakarana in the Bhagavat Sandarbha, where a distinction is being made between Bhagavan and Brahma in the Bhagavat Sandarbha. So this is, I think Alex says, is between 79 and 81, where in particular, right? So what is the first one? The Sanakadi Vaikuntha Darshana Prastave. So the first one is when in the third canto, the 15th chapter. So this chapter almost in its entirety has been quoted there in Bhagavat Sandarbha. Sri Jiva goes into an analysis of this event. So we've been talking a great deal about that in relationship to Jaya and Vijaya, but in actual fact, the discussion of the four Kumaras and their going to Vaikuntha, that was given much more prominence in the Bhagavat Sandarbha, and here again he's also mentioning it one more time, in order to just simply restate the fact that Bhagavat Darshan, Bhagavat Sakshatkara is greater than Brahma Sakshatkara. Just think of all the things that we've gone through in this Anuched and the previous Anucheds that are about this. So, I mean, from a philosophical point of view, this chapter was stressed in the Bhagavat Sandarbha, and just a little bit after that, again, in the same Bhagavat Sandarbha, about the same subject, really, Narada and Vyasa Sangvad. So Narada Vyasa Sangvad in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. And we've already talked about that several times also, that this is in talking about Narada's previous lifetime. So those two sections of the Bhagavatam are recurring in Jiva Goswami's writing for this particular reason, is that they establish clearly the superiority of Bhagavan realization over Brahma realization. So there's more to it than just that. So he says, he even goes on, says, so Sri Narada Vyasa Sangvada Adi Maya Brahma Bhagavata Taratamya Prakarana. So Brahma, Bhagavan, Taratamya means comparison. In that particular section of the Bhagavad Purana, so it has been shown, the superiority of the one over the other has been shown there. And then he quotes 2 verses from those 2 particular sections, and what he says that he says, Yatra tasyara vindanayanasya ityadikam jigyasitadam adhitam cha ityadikam cha vachana jatam prabalatamam. So he's saying that, so he's given, in those particular places, he's given a whole segment of the conversation, several verses from those particular sources in the Bhagavatam. But he says of all of those verses, the ones that are the strongest are the following two. One from that Sanaka story, the four Kumara story, and one from the conversation between Narada and Vyasa. So translation, therefore only pure, oh, now once again before I read on, let me bow down to Satyanarayana Das Babaji and let me not forget to do so on a regular daily basis, because I want it to be known very clearly that this task that I'm doing, I am doing it on behalf of Satyanarayana Das Babaji, and I'm doing it as a service to Satyanarayana Das Babaji. And if my purpose, my understanding of that service is to come to the best possible understanding of Jiva Goswami's intent and to express that as clearly as possible in the English language. So that is what I'm trying to do. And these lectures, these talks, are primarily to help me clear my mind. As you can see, my mind is not particularly tidy. And quite often when I'm talking about one thing, I find that my mind goes off in some other direction. But I don't think that's particularly bad, but it just doesn't make for a very good class. Hopefully, I can reprise my train of thought, but quite often, some good ideas do get lost. But they're waiting to become reincarnated in another opportunity. So, let's get to the translation here. Only pure-hearted people see Bhagavan, and that alone is to be called mukti. Its superiority over Brahman realization has been shown in Bhagavat Sandarbha, in the description of the visit of the Kumaras to Vaikuntha, and also in the section comparing Brahman and Bhagavan based on the dialogue between Sri Narada Muni and Vyasa, etc. So that's that's been blown there, because there have to be both of those stories, and they are both in the section comparing Brahman and Bhagavan. So I have to change that. In these sections of Bhagavat Sandarbha, verses 3:15-43 and 1.5.44 are the most powerful. Well, I think obviously here Jiva Goswami is expecting you to go scurrying. This is just your extra reading material. Go back and read this section of Bhagavat Sandarbha. And get that down in your heads. But of all the verses that are described there, so once you've gone there and you've read the whole story again, right, then commit this verse to memory. So this is the verse that comes up again and again. But the idea here is that they smelled, we talked about this already, Tasya nayanasya padaravinda kinchaka misra tulasi makaranda vayu antagata Swavivarena chakarate sham Sanshobhamaksharajusham apichitta tango. So we saw this verse plenty earlier on in this in one of the sections of the 7th Anuched. Right? When the air carrying the elixir of tulasi mixed with the filaments of the lotus-eyed Bhagavan's lotus feet, when the air carrying the elixir of tulasi mixed with the filaments of the lotus-eyed Bhagavan's lotus feet entered within through its own natural gateways, the nostrils. A bit of a difficult one there because it says Swavivarena, Antargatak Swavivarena. So Swavivarena, the air has its own gateways. So Vivara means a gateway, Vivara means a hole, really, a space. So the Swavivarena, the idea that it would be the entering into their own apertures. So it says, that the air entered through its own. Yeah, so it entered within them. It's a bit of a difficult one, right? When the air carrying the elixir of Tulsi, mixed with the filaments of the lotus-eyed Bhagavan's lotus feet, entered within them through its own natural gateways, the nostrils. They experienced a commotion, both in mind and in body, even though they were established in the bliss of the imperishable Brahman. So, Akshara Jusham. So when the air carrying the elixir of Tulasi, mixed with the filaments of the lotus-eyed Bhagavan's lotus feet, entered within them through its own natural gateways, they experienced a commotion, both in mind and in body, even though they were established in the bliss of the imperishable Brahman. So they, through the nostrils, not many stories of the finding God through the nostrils, but here we have one. So that's the most powerful verse, he says, because it states openly, Akshara Jusham, that they were fixed in the imperishable Brahman. But still, Sankshobhanam, they created a commotion, Chitta Tanvoho, in their minds and in their bodies. So the other verse, and this is now Narada speaking to Vyasa. So once again, the point here is this is supposed to be a killer verse, right? To tell us that Brahman and Bhagavan, that realization of Bhagavan is superior to realization of Brahman. So this is Narada speaking to Vyasa. Jigyasitam adhitam cha yatatad brahma sanatanam atapi sochasyatmanam akritata iva prabhu. Jigyasitam adhitam cha Yadtad Brahma Sanatanam Athapi Sochasyatmanam Akritata Iva Prabhu. So this is Narada coming and challenging Vyasadeva, saying, Vyasadeva, you have attained the Brahman, Jigyasitam, you have inquired, Jigyasa, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So you have inquired, you have the path of Jnana, Jigyasitam, you have sought through the path of Jnana, Adhitam cha, you have studied the scriptural texts, you have studied the lore, the knowledge of the wise, of the elders, of the ancestors. And what is that thing? Yattada Brahma Sanatanam. So what you have inquired into, what you have studied, what you have spent your entire life, you're the one subject that you have devoted your entire career to the Sanatanam, eternal Brahman. And despite that, here you are lamenting for yourself. And of course, this is considered from the Bhagavad Gita, we recognize already. Ashochanapyashocastvam pragyavadanscha bhashase gatasuna gatasuscha nanushocanti panditaha. So in self, you're atatapi shochasi. You are lamenting for yourself. Akritartha iva, as though you have not achieved your goal, as though you have been undone. Kritartha means successful. So the most successful author, let's say of all time, he does not feel as though he has completed his literary contribution to humankind. But how could that be? He has explained, his work, the essence of his work is to reveal and to explain that Sanatana Brahma. So how could he be akritartha? How could he not have achieved the ultimate artha, the purushartha? Why had he not achieved the parama purushartha, despite his lifelong sadhana? So, there's more. So these verses are quoted. So this is kind of like, your Gaudiya Kantahar, right? The Gaudiya Kantahar, the manual of killer verses. These are the verses that you have to memorize. These are the ones that will stop an argument. And these are our pramanas. So Jiva Goswami is giving us these pramanas to show the superiority of the experience of Bhagavat Sakshatkara. And that Bhagavat Sakshatkara is the real meaning of mukti. If Vyasa thought that he was liberated, then why was he still dissatisfied? Bhagavan realized Brahma Sakshatkara should mean the end of all dissatisfaction. But he was not. He was still dissatisfied. Something was missing. So here's another verse. This one's from Sri Dhruva Maharaj. And this is again a case of the giving of benedictions. Ya nivrite satanuvritam tava pada padma dhyanad bhavada janakata sravanena vasyat Sa brahmani swamahimanya pinathamabhu kimbantaka silulita patatam vimana Jani vriti satanuvritam tava pada padma Dhyanat bhavada janakata sravanena pasyat Sa brahmani swamahimanya pinathamabhut Kimbantaka silulitat patatam vimanat. the bliss relished by embodied beings through meditation on your lotus feet, or through hearing stories of or by or told by your devotees, is not available even in Brahman, which is your glory. How then can it be enjoyed by the devas who fall down from their celestial carriage, which are destroyed by the sword of death? So this is Dhruva Maharaj. So that joy, nirvriti is another word for ananda. So that ananda, Jai Sri Radha, nice cool water. It is in the mid-40s. It's being very warm, generally. Very, saps one's energy. Ya nivriti satanuvritam tava pada padma dhyana babada janakata sravanena vasyat. So the joy that comes by meditating on Krishna's lotus feet, or by hearing the stories of his devotees, of Bhavajana Katha Sravanena Vasyat. So that can be taken two ways. Either hearing about the devotees or hearing from the devotees. I'm in favor of the stories of the devotees. But we'll talk about that some other time. But in here, the idea that the bliss that comes from hearing the stories either told by the devotees or about the devotees, that brings bliss, as does meditating on the Lord's lotus feet. And that bliss cannot be matched. Sa brahmani swamahimanyapi natha mabhut. Very interesting. He says mabhut. And mabhut means may it not be. But here it doesn't mean, he's not saying may it not be. May that happiness not be not present in the swamahimani, in the brahmani. But it means don't bring such words to my ears. Heaven forbid that anyone should think that such happiness, such bliss, the bliss of kirtan, the bliss of hearing and chanting about Radha and Krishna, from the lips of a realized soul, that the bliss that comes from that, the satisfaction that comes, savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti radho kraje. Love for God, when it arises in the heart, then one has achieved the Paramadharma. And that is not available in Brahman, even though that is Bhagavan's own glory. So this is the kind of difficult concept that's being communicated here by Jiva Goswami and by the Bhagavatam. Brahman and Bhagavan are not two distinct, separate things. They're aspects of the same thing. They're perceptions of the same thing. The one includes the other. But, unfortunately, not everybody gets the whole picture. So when you only have, the parts that represent love, the parts that represent feelings of intimacy and closeness to God, the feeling of getting personal love from God, that is actually higher than a state of equilibrium and knowledge. But that doesn't mean that the gains or the achievements of Brahma Jnana are not incorporated into Bhagavat Tattva Jnana and Bhagavat Sakshatkara. So anyhow, the point is here, it says, so it's not available even in Brahman, which is your glory. How then can it be enjoyed? How then can it be enjoyed by, or how can there be such pleasure, such joy, such happiness experienced by the devas who fall down from their celestial carriages, which are destroyed by the sword of death? At least Brahman is eternal, but the gods, their happiness in the heavenly planets, the material pleasures, those are all temporal, and the airplanes which carry them around will eventually run out of gas and fall to the ground. So, Sri Bhagavata Bhaktrita Tatparyancha Tatraiva Swamukha Nibrita Chetas Tadvidastanya Bhavaha Ityadina Darshitam. So this has also been shown, and actually this was in the Tattva Sandarbha. So if you look at the Tattva Sandarbha, and I don't know what number it's given, but the actual first Anuched, because if you take out the Pramana portion, that introductory portion out of the Tattva Sandarbha, you start, and the first verse, the first Bhagavatam verse that is quoted as an Anuched, right? So each Priti Sandarbha Anuched has one verse, that's the main verse of the Anuched. So like in one Anuched, like the one we're doing right now, it can go on forever. But it's the one verse is selected as being the verse which is the main verse of that Anuched. So each Anuched is measured by its principal verse. So the first principal verse, so here you have little known facts about the Sandarbhas. The first Srimad Bhagavatam verse. So the point was that he's saying here, Sri Bhagavata Bhaktri Tatparyam Cha Tatraiva Swamukha Nibrita Chetas, etc. So he quoted this verse from the 12th canto, right near the end. 12th canto, 12th chapter, 68th verse. It's the last verse of the chapter. And there in that verse, so he quotes that verse at the beginning of Tattva Sandarbha. What's he trying to prove there? He's trying to prove that now we're going to talk about the Bhagavata Purana, and we've established already a few things about the Bhagavata Purana, that it was written by Vyasa and so on. And now we say we're going to discuss what is the Tatparya, what is the purpose, what is the goal, what is the subject of the Bhagavata Purana. Well, the first thing we should do, who is the speaker of the Bhagavata Purana, and what do we learn from him? So Shukadev is the first speaker of the Bhagavatam, so he's the son of Vyasadeva. So this verse, and there's actually a couple of others, that glorify Shukadev, and they glorify him also in this way, but this verse, somehow or another, well, first of all, it's written in a long meter, so it has a bit of gravitas. Swasukha nibrita chetas tadvyudastanya bhavo ajita ruchira lila krishna sarastadiyaha vyatanuta kripayaya statva deepam puranam Tamakila Vrijinaghanam Vyasasunam Natosmi. So this has been stated several places. It's stated in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, in this 1st chapter of the 2nd canto. So in a couple of places, Shukadeva himself says, Parinishthitopi Nairgunya Uttama Shloka Leelaya Aditavan Dwaparadho. He says that I studied it. So this is the point was that Pradinishthito Pinarikunyauttama Shloka Lilaya Grihita Chetai Aditavanya Grihitavanya Adita, I forgot the verse now. Okay, so that at any rate, it was that Shukadev, he says himself, I was situated in Brahman knowledge, and yet I heard Krishna's Leela. And here it says, Leela, Ajita Ruchira Leela Krishna Sarastadiya. That I became, that he became his essence, Krishna Saras, the essence of his being, was attracted upon hearing Krishna Katha. So therefore, because Krishna Katha was more attractive to him than meditating on Brahman, therefore that must be something superior. That's what is being stated. And it was because of that experience that he spoke the Bhagavata Purana. So there in the Tattva Sandarbha, this verse is being quoted to show that the speaker of the Bhagavatam, Shukadeva, had this purpose in mind when he spoke the Bhagavata Purana. So I offer my obeisances unto Srila Vyasadeva's son, Sri Shuka, who destroys all sins. Although his consciousness was completely filled with the bliss of self-realization, and though he had consequently cast off all other feelings and thoughts, his essence was irresistibly drawn to the beautiful pastimes of Lord Ajita, Krishna. Out of compassion, he thus delineated this Purana, which illumines or which reveals reality. Tattva Deepam Puranam. And he doesn't stop there. Jiva Goswami goes on and with a flourish turns to Bhagavad Gita. And there we have the verse, Brahma Bhuta Prasannanatma Nashochati Nakankshati Samaksarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhakting Labhate Param. So the Bhagavad Gita at the very end reminds us all of the supremacy of bhakti, that love of God stands above knowledge, stands above karma. And how does that happen? Well, in this particular reading here, he says that one who becomes situated in Brahman, someone who has realized Brahman, having realized Brahman and being prasannatma, that such a person neither grieves nor hankers for anything. He is equal to all beings, seeing the presence of God in all of them. And at that time, he attains the supreme bhakti. So this is exactly what I've just been saying. That the gains of Brahma Jnana, those are incorporated. It's not that they are neglected and you somehow think, oh, well, it doesn't matter because I'm a devotee. On the contrary. And this is a very interesting thing because we are Brahmavada. From one point of view, it can be the worst thing possible. It can be hell for a devotee, Brahmavada. And yet at the same time, we are talking about an Advaya Tattva. So what is that Advaya Tattva? So to attain the supreme devotion, Para Bhakti. So we have a Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya Bhakti Yoga. Through yoga we get yoga. Through bhakti we get bhakti. But even through this is actually, we've just been talking about that through darshan of Krishna, one's heart is purified. So therefore, we seek to keep in contact with Krishna through all our senses, through chanting, through hearing, through remembering, and so on. To keep our our being in proximity, in conscious proximity to God as much as is possible. So if one is conquered the self, then one can keep oneself in the proximity of God. So that is when you attain the supreme devotion. The supreme devotion doesn't come from having read Ujjvala Nilamani. So there's a little bit more and then we'll be finished. So Ata eva Sri Prahladasya Bhagavata Sakshatkara Krita Sarvabadhunana Purvaka Brahma Sakshatkara Anantara Bhagavat Sakshatkara Visheshatmaka Nivritting Paramabhishtatvena Aha. Aha. So we get that when Jiva Goswami wants to make a point, then stops with the short sentences and gives it to you whole. So Ata eva Sri Prahladasya. So he's introducing this verse which is spoken by Prahlada. Bhagavata Sakshatkara Krita Sarvabadhunana Purvaka Brahma Sakshatkara Anantara Bhagavat Sakshatkara Visheshatmaka Nivrittim. Get a lot of sakshatkaras in that one compound. All right, so let's look at them part by part. Why don't we go to the end? Because he says aha, so the verse is introducing the verse, so Prahlad speaks the verse, and he's saying that paramabhishtatvena, that this should be the most desirable thing. So what is the most desirable thing? In other words, what's the paramapurushartha? What is the most desirable thing? What is the ultimate goal of life? So he says, nirvrittim. So we just saw that with ya nirvrittim stanubritam tava pada padma dhyanat bhavat janakata sravanena vasyat. This one, nirvritti. Another word for ananda, for joy. So ananda, so this ananda, this nirvritti, was spoken of by Prahlada as being the ultimate goal, this ananda. What was that ananda? It was the ananda that was Visheshatmaka, that was, was Atmaka, was composed of, or was permeated by a particular special Bhagavat Sakshatkara. So this Bhagavat Sakshatkara, what was this Bhagavat Sakshatkara? This was directly seeing Bhagavan. But it came Brahma Sakshatkara Anantara. It came after Brahma Sakshatkara. So what does he mean by Brahma Sakshatkara? He says, Sarvavadhunana Purvaka. So it's Bhagavat Sakshatkara Krita Sarvavadhunana Purvaka. So this Brahma Sakshatkara was preceded by a experience of Bhagavan, a Sakshatkara of Bhagavan, that destroyed all the impurities for once and for all. So that's he's putting Brahma Sakshatkara as being integral to the process. It follows Bhagavat Sakshatkara. All of one's impurities are removed. Then one experiences the bliss of one's identity with the Atma, as Atma, identity with the internal potency, identity with God, a part of that world, crossing into the Advaya Tattva, into the concept that there is nothing separate from Krishna. And so that is the highest bliss. to see Krishna again after that. So you see Krishna, you become purified, you have that sense of identity of the one indivisible truth. And in that state, you again experience the form and virtues and qualities of Krishna in their pristine state as they truly are. Without the coverings that are forced upon us by material identities. So here is, to conclude this chapter, to conclude this verse was spoken by Prahlad in a very similar situation. There's some parallels between the Prahlad story and the Dhruva story. So again, what happened with Dhruva, Krishna touched him with Narayan touched him. I'm sorry, they're all Krishna to me. Narayan touched him with the conch, and so then Dhruva became empowered to speak. So this is at the very beginning of the 9th chapter of the 7th canto, which is one of the stronger chapters in the Bhagavatam. The prayers of Prahlad, the prayers of Brahma in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. There's a few other of these rather important hymns, let's say, that are sung in the Bhagavatam. So this 9th chapter, Prahlad Maharaj's prayers to Nrsingadev are really among the finest verses in the Bhagavatam, no doubt about it. And many of the verses contain quite important insights into bhakti. So here he says, Sakshatkara sparsatudha kila shubha sapadya vivyakta paratma darsana tat pada padamang hridi nivrito dadho hrishyat tanuh klinna hrida srulochana. So it's describing Prahlad. Satat kara sparsathuta kila shubha sapadya vivyakta paratma darshana tat pada padmam hridi nivrito dadho hrishyat Tanu klinna hrida srulochana. So all the sins of Prahlad were dispelled by the touch of Bhagavan's hand. And direct realization of the Supreme Brahman was revealed to him immediately. Being happy, he took Bhagavan's lotus feet in his heart, with his hair standing on end out of joy, his heart being soft and eyes full of tears. I think that his tears are... we did this one before in the early going there in 7th Untitled, so I'll just leave it to stand by itself. So the point, you got the point, everybody got the point about seeing Krishna. That the seeing of Krishna, that's the grace. And the seeing of Krishna can be looked at in many different ways. We have to know what are the obstacles to seeing Krishna. Offenses. And we have to be able to recognize the degrees of our obstinacy in not wanting to see Krishna. Because we only don't see Krishna because we don't want to see him. If we wanted to see him, we would see him. So it's the not wanting that we have to get rid of. So here Prahlad, tears filled his eyes. he held Nishingadeva's feet to his heart. The Lord's paw, which the claws which had just finished dissecting Hiranyakashipu, and he placed that gently on Prahlad's head. And Prahlad was Hrishyat and feeling ecstasy. So the point is that by seeing Krishna, all the remaining impurities will be removed. And that is symbolic of Brahman realization. The sense of identity with Bhagavan, of entering into his story, being complete. So here's only a few words here by Satyanarayan Das Babaji. Thus, it has been established that only those who have a pure heart can see Bhagavan. Jiva Goswami equates this with mukti. Purity of heart means freedom from offenses. Bhagavat Sakshatkara is superior to Brahma Sakshatkara because Brahman is an incomplete manifestation of Bhagavan, and that is something that has been repeated many times, and I hope that all you who are interested in understanding the absolute truth will be able to understand the distinction between Brahman and Bhagavan. And if the light shines brightly, you will understand why we say that Bhagavat Sakshatkara is superior to Brahma Sakshatkara. That as spiritual realizations go, what we are interested in is the Parama Purushartha, just like here he said, Parama Bhishtatvena. And this was the Paramarthatvena, Kritarthatvena. Find perfection, the highest perfection. Because if in Brahman realization, none of the human qualities have the chance to shine. Love ceases to be a possibility. And yet love is the greatest union, the greatest feeling of union of all. So let's leave it there, and we will continue with Anuched number 8. We have gone through we've struggled through this, the 7th Anuched. I was quite an experience, to be quite honest with you. I enjoyed it greatly. And I hope that I didn't repeat myself too much. And we will continue on tomorrow with Anuched number 8. Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe, Jai Jai Sri Radhe Shyam.